Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Harry Sale Wealth Show. I'm joined today by Jennifer Reynolds, who is a lawyer and mediator specializing in family law at her firm called Fresh Legal. She'll give you a better review of her experience in a moment, but I wanted to let you know that there's a few notable things about Jennifer. She has a preferred mode of transportation is by bike, e-bike, I believe. If she's not in the office, she's exploring local parks with her kid. She loves children's books, tries to keep plants alive in the office and garden. And although she is originally from Southwestern Ontario, she is an East Coast girl at heart. Thank you for joining us today, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Appreciate you coming on. Really, let's just get right into it. Just tell us a bit of a background of your professional background and really how you got into family law.
I started with an undergrad in child studies and early childhood education, which leads a lot of people into teaching professions and helping professions. But I also had a passion for arguing and debate. And it's that classic, you like to argue, you like to talk, go to law school. It does turn out that working in the law has a lot less talking and a lot more writing and researching. So that doesn't really connect necessarily, but I went with that passion for helping people and working with families and working with kids and turned that into working as a family lawyer and using the skills, the soft skills and the interview skills and communication and family development and all that information that I gained in my undergrad to work with children and families now.
That's really, really good to hear. In other areas, including finance, just curious about the way you cross-collaborate with other professionals and any of the non-legal aspects of separation that you might need support with.
Mm-hmm. Constantly our clients need something. I tell my clients that it's like a pie or a puzzle that we're building. And as a lawyer, I'm one piece of that. I'm providing you with legal advice. Or as a mediator, I'm helping you talk with your spouse and come to an agreement. But there's a whole bunch of other things going on for my clients. They're moving. They're getting money out of a pension maybe and having to invest it for the first time. They're making financial decisions about their future. They need therapy and professional support. They're learning skills they didn't have before, and they need all of these professionals to help them with that. So from the beginning, I've really worked hard at building my network with people like you to say to my clients, here's where my work ends or starts to bleed into another person's work. And how can we get that other person on board? Who do you know in your network? Who do I know in my network that's going to be a really good fit? Whether that's a realtor or a coach or a financial planner or a mover or a financial literacy specialist. There's all sorts of people that my clients talk to.
It's interesting to see the different approaches that people have between their business and your business. I'm just curious about what your approach to family law might be in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, beyond recognizing that I'm one small piece of a puzzle and they need to talk to other people and other people know more than I do. The other piece of that nutshell is recognizing that my clients are often in a really difficult situation. It's really stressful. And my job, whether I'm wearing my lawyer hat or my mediator hat, is to help make the situation better, right? Help them be empowered, get them the information they need, the advice they need, connect them with the professionals they need to talk to so that they can rebuild their family as efficiently and cost effectively as possible.
Yeah, I'm sure cost is a huge factor. I know a lot of people will consider, it's funny in my business, you want sometimes the least expensive person you think might be the best, but in certain cases for law, not necessarily having the lowest cost would be the best, person to be with. So I'm sure cost is always a factor, but I know when we're getting into things, when we're talking about mediation, some people might not be completely familiar with that process. Just really, for people who might be unfamiliar, just explain a little bit about mediation and collaborative law.
So both of those processes are outside of traditional litigation that you would think of, right? I'm going to my lawyer and I'm going to sue you and I'm going to take you for all you're worth, right? The lawyer in these situations plays more of a role of empowerment and advice and guidance. And the decision-making and the control through the process stays with the client. They're not usually in mediation or collaborative law asking their lawyer to communicate with the other person on their behalf. They're speaking for themselves. They're making decisions for themselves. They're not asking a judge or any third party to make a decision for them. And when we're doing collaborative family law, often we're looking at a multidisciplinary team approach, right? Where we actually pull into the room. Each person has their own lawyer, but in the physical room during conversations or just in the team, we might have a financial planner such as yourself providing advice to the clients about financial decisions. We might have a coach or a neutral facilitator or someone supporting the children. And that whole team of professionals works together to help the clients figure out what their life is going to look like now and how they're going to implement it. And it's really all about, in both cases, mediation and collaborative law, it's about problem solving together as opposed to taking sides and going into your corners and fighting.
It's a different approach. Sometimes you might think it's just going to be a combative battle. So it's really good to hear that, there's something else available in terms of, a style or an approach or what have you. But, I'm just curious about how they might differ from traditional litigation and family law cases. Most people might think it would be combative. I know you just mentioned it's more collaborative, but any more details you can share there about maybe the process itself?
The collaborative process itself is a process of four-way meetings with other neutrals or other professionals in the room, where the two lawyers and the clients meet together. And then they might be discussing a particular issue, trying to problem solve, or they might be identifying information that they need. They go away, they do their homework, they get legal advice, and then they come back to the table, as opposed to lawyers writing letters back and forth before going to court. Mediation, my process is very specific, and most mediators do follow a very similar process. That the very first thing that we do is we meet with each person one-on-one. They have an opportunity to have a confidential discussion with the mediator. And the purpose of that is actually what we call screening. We're assessing for domestic violence or any sort of power imbalances, whether that's from violence or education or resources or emotional readiness. We want to know where each client is, and we want to make sure that the process is going to be safe for each of them and is going to lead to a fair, productive resolution, right? And we're having those screening conversations and observations throughout the process too. Once we have a chance to talk to the client and make sure that we understand where they're coming from and what their goals are, and if they have concerns about power imbalances, and we've designed the process, then we do information gathering with each party, and we help them share that information with each other so that they can make informed decisions. We're looking at things like income tax returns and financial information about assets and debt. And that's where sometimes, to make things easy for my clients, if they work with a financial planner, I might say, can you authorize me to talk to your financial planner? And then that takes that off their load, right? Yes, they can definitely get in touch with you and get all of their statements, but it's one more thing on their to-do list and they're already overwhelmed. If I can say, hey, Harry, I'm helping out John Smith. Can you send me all of his statements from a particular month? And you might be in a position to help me understand what they are, right? This is this non-registered account. This is why we put money here. This is what's going on, right? Once we have all the information, we have joint discussions with generally the two parties and myself as the mediator facilitating it. Sometimes they bring lawyers to those conversations, and that's the conversation and the problem solving and the getting creative. We have a shared screen, we've got whiteboards, we're working out, what are all the questions that we need to talk about and what are the answers and what's going to work for your family? And is it the legal model? Is it what a judge might do? Or is it something more creative? And then the last piece of the process is documenting that in an agreement. If their mediator is a lawyer like myself, we at times will actually draft up a formal separation agreement. If they're not a lawyer or other professional that's able to draft agreements, they may just draft a summary of the agreement that then is taken to a lawyer to write up into an agreement. And each party has the opportunity to talk to a lawyer and get independent legal advice so that they know what the agreement means. They understand its risks, its benefits, whether it's a good idea, bad idea to sign it within a legal context.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear that background, that you can do kind of both sides. Would that be a unique combination, or is that something that's where you can not only do the mediation, but also offer the lawyer side as well?
It depends from city to city, I find, jurisdiction. So in Ottawa, a lot of our mediators are also lawyers. But the important thing to remember is that once we have our mediator hat on, we have to remain neutral. So I can use some of my legal skills to draft up an agreement. And the law around regulated professions says that I'm allowed to do that. But I can't provide legal advice to either party. But certainly my experience as a lawyer and my experience as a mediator, they inform each file, right? The skills and the experiences that I have as a lawyer help me be a better mediator. And what I learn as a mediator helps me be a better lawyer.
I'm sure you've helped a lot of people, as you mentioned, through the emotional aspects of law as well. One of the biggest questions that I have to deal with is dealing with behavioral finance and when to sell, when's the right time to buy, things like that. I'm curious how you've helped clients navigate the emotional challenges as well through this process.
You probably see, if you work with people, separating a lot of the similar things that I see, right? You might have somebody who didn't take the lead financially in the relationship. It's not uncommon, but there's still a lot of shame in it when a client comes to you and says, well, I let them make all the decisions and I trusted them and I don't actually understand what an RSP is or anything, right? And there's shame involved just in going through a separation, even though they're becoming more and more common and it's not a thing to be ashamed of, right? There's all these emotions and they're grieving, right? And to help them through all of that, I find is a process of empowerment, okay? The same thing that you do with your work, saying, oh, I'm going to help you understand. You're coming to me, you don't understand what's happening. I'm going to help you understand it. I'm going to help you maybe use your voice for the first time. I'm going to help you make decisions for yourself and for your family. Listening to them really helps a lot of the emotional part, right? They just need somebody who isn't their parent or their spouse or somebody who's involved in the situation, somebody neutral where they can just be and talk. And sometimes they're saying awful things about their ex-spouse just because they need to say it somewhere. And my clients will get emotional and they might curse or yell, and they always immediately apologize to me. And I say, like, if you're not going to do that here, if you can't do that in my space, where are you going to do it? That's part of this process too. So feel free, feel comfortable. I'm here to help you get through this.
One of the biggest questions, of course, relating what you do to finance, protecting clients financially during separation. I've definitely helped a few people before with this, but I'm really curious about how your approach helps clients financially and just maybe a little bit more color with that.
Yeah, so there's different financial aspects when it comes to a separation. One that we've already touched on is the costs of going through the process. Okay? Who am I paying? What are the professionals involved? How much is a lawyer going to cost, right? So we help clients by making sure they're aware of the cost, sending them ongoing invoices. They know how much money they've spent, helping them decide, do you want to pursue a particular route because it's going to cost this much, right? So just the day-to-day costs of a separation. The second piece is there ongoing financial support? Are they going to be paying support or are they going to be receiving support? Figuring out what everybody's income is for that purpose. And so you're protecting both the spouses, you're protecting kids that are involved, right? You're making sure that everybody feels like it's fair and that they're going to be taken care of. And then the last piece is dividing the assets that they've built up during their relationship. Right? The assets, the debts, the net worth that they built, and making sure they understand what their rights and their obligations are in the law. And then the big piece is making sure they have information. They have full disclosure. They are confident saying, I am happy to waive my right to something, or I'm happy to accept an offer because I know what's on the table. A lot of people come to us saying, I don't want to fight. I don't want any of my spouse's pension. I don't want any of my spouse's business, or my spouse can keep the house. They have some ideas of what they want the outcome to look like. And we always say, that's great. If you don't want to touch their pension and that's a promise that you've made and you want to uphold it, but we also need to know what their pension is worth so that you're making an informed decision, because I don't want their pension or I don't want their RSP. Saying that is a lot different when you can say, I know it's worth $500,000, and then connecting them with the financial advisors, realizing, my job is to say your rights and your obligations are up to here. And then when they look at me and say, well, should I cash out my pension? Should I keep the house? Should I put money in an RSP? Should I cash out my RSP? I say, that's where my knowledge stops. And if you don't already have a financial planner, you need to find a financial planner, and you need to sit down with somebody and have a conversation, and make sure you're making not just decisions in light of your legal rights and obligations, but know long-term and separating out the emotion, right? Because especially the house is always this huge emotional thing. I bet you see that all the time. I want to keep the house. This is where my kids grew up. This is where I built this place. I renovated this place. I have memories. I want to stay here. And they need to talk to somebody and say, if I keep this house, is that a good financial decision or not? So sometimes protecting them is just being that, sober second opinion and saying, let's look at this from all aspects.
Yeah, I always say that with my clients, there's a 51-49 relationship. Essentially, they have the tie-breaking vote, but we're allowed to kind of interject our opinion. Here's our best support that we can provide. Sounds like you're about the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. Empower them, give them the information they need, but recognize that this is their life.
Yeah. And I guess everybody's completely different, so the approach changes a little bit, which I'll just get into later on. But I know you touched a bit on costs, and I'm really curious about just maybe a bit more color on out-of-court solutions and how they might differ financially from, full in-court.
Yeah. Overall, when you look at it, generally speaking, staying out of court is generally less expensive. Right? When you go to court, there's required appearances, there's required documents, there's more information that needs to be, or not necessarily information, but there's more specific ways things need to be communicated and filed. Going to court alone can be really expensive because you might be scheduled for a 10 o'clock appearance, but not see the judge until 2, and your lawyer's there all day with you. Okay? And generally, when you're in court, you're involved in a more high conflict situation. And more high conflict situations will inevitably be more expensive. There are people who are more litigious or having a harder time coming to an agreement. Right? There's more people involved, and it can take a lot longer and take a lot more money. Anything out of court definitely has the potential to be less expensive. It usually is. I can't promise it's going to be, because even mediation can go off the rails. But generally speaking, when you stay out of court and keep more control over the process and have fewer professionals involved in terms of legal professionals, and you can tailor the times you talk to your spouse and when your lawyer's involved and when they're not, right? And when you focus on problem solving instead of fighting and presenting your best case and asking someone else to decide for you, that can be much more time efficient, right? And anything that's time efficient is going to help your costs.
Yeah, of course, would come down to time and hourly rates and a few things like that. But, hopefully things aren't settled, to the point where people have enough in their pockets to continue and they don't bankrupt themselves in the process,
Yeah,
hopefully avoiding
especially if
that.
they have kids, right? They've got to save for education, and they might have 2 houses now that they need to maintain on their 2 incomes. Something that I do on the mediation side is that most of our mediation work is offered on a flat fee basis. So at the very least, they have certainty in terms of how much they're going to spend, right? They can say, we want one more session and we know how much that's going to cost us, right? So that helps a little bit. But anything that keeps the money in my client's pocket is, in my opinion, that's good for them and good for me even.
Yep. In terms of your approach, I know you've talked about different family dynamics, having children in the mix, things like that. I'm curious how it might change between, let's just say, one, spouse and another spouse relative to maybe a family who has multiple kids, or even, kids from different families. How would your approach change in different scenarios? I'm just curious how you'd adjust to unique dynamics.
Oh, absolutely. And families are constantly changing, right? We're not just talking about two parents with a couple kids anymore, right? We're talking about blended families, like you talked about. We're talking about multi-caregiver, multi-generational families, right? Um, Families with three or more parents. All of these things are happening, and it's about understanding who who are the people in the room, who needs to have an hand in this decision making, or who is influencing the decision making, right? Blended families, sometimes you have a new partner who they're not necessarily part of the conversation, but they are part of the conversation, right? Because their spouse goes back, the ex spouse goes and talks to their new girlfriend or talks to their new boyfriend, and they're going to say something. Or they might have a blended family, kids, they're trying to put together different parenting schedules, right? Understanding what's important to different people based on their life experience and their belief and their knowledge and education, right? Understanding that not everybody's a cookie cutter and not everybody's going to think the same things are important. Right? Just because I think something's important doesn't mean my client's going to care about that whatsoever, right? So a lot of questions, a lot of understanding, a lot of conversations, and a lot of respect for where people are coming from and what's important to them. And asking sometimes the client, I'll say to my client, or I'll say to one of the parties in mediation, you know your former spouse better than anybody, right? You might feel like you don't know them right now, but you have lived with them for so many years. How do you think they're going to react to this? You know, do you think I should use this language, more forceful language or more gentle language? Do you think that they want to receive a letter from a lawyer? Do you think that will help the situation? Or do you think it's going to make things worse? Okay. And sometimes my clients say, yeah, I want you to write to them because they're not going to take this seriously until they hear from a lawyer. Others say, I don't even want them to know I've talked to you, right? That'll make everything worse. And so understanding that family to family to family, everybody's different. And sometimes even the kids need to be talked to, right? And whether we pull in a professional or do what we call child inclusive mediation, where I talk to the children, what are all the players? What's important to all of them? Right? And understanding and adjusting is really important.
I'm sure every situation is completely unique. You're going in with different dynamics. So glad to know that you're adjusting so well and have a mind for it. As we kind of move towards the end, really curious about how your approach, especially as it relates to these centers of influence or professionals you also use, like other financial advisors or anybody else. Curious how that approach has benefited a family. Maybe if you can give just a brief example just for everybody to hear.
Yeah. So a family that's rebuilding, right? They've separated. They want to work together. They don't want to fight. And they come to me and say, well, here's where we're at, right? And here are the things that we've come up with so far. And I was able to say, okay, we can come to this agreement, but let's talk about if one of you is moving out of the house, one of them inevitably, right? In this situation, somebody had to move. They needed a mortgage broker. They needed a realtor. They needed a real estate agent. Right? They needed all these different people to figure out where they could move, what they could afford, right? This in particular, one of the spouses had struggled with just financial literacy. They were figuring out, they were self-employed. They needed to figure out how to put money away for HST, put money away for taxes, and pay their mortgage. And they were working with a wonderful financial literacy coach who was really empowering them to figure out budgeting and moving. And then they could come to the mediation session, having talked to their coach, and really say confidently what they needed and what they needed the outcome to look like. And then we're usually talking about splitting up accounts. We're often talking about a house buyout. We're talking about big sums of money, right? And that's where they go to the financial advisor and the financial planner to say, okay, I had a plan for my retirement that depended on two people in a house and our one kid. and this is what we were going to do, and these were our resources, and we structured everything, and now that feels like it's completely blown up. And not only do I need a new plan, I need a new person. I need a new financial planner who's my person, who my ex hasn't talked to, who I can trust, who's going to be my brand new financial planner. I'm restarting this, and they're going to help me figure out, can I still retire at 62, or am I now retiring at 60? Right. And in that case too, I believe they worked with a therapist. They're getting them ready for hard conversations. They're empowering them. And in every case, I'm encouraging them to talk to therapists if they don't have one, get their kids therapy, involve their kids in the process to the extent that it's age appropriate and appropriate for that child. Right. And both the parties in that case talk to lawyers to say, all right, we know the legal model is here. Here's our box, right? And we're going just a little bit outside the box. And we want to make sure that we understand how far outside the box we're going and that everybody's comfortable with that, right? So countless people playing a role, everybody having a strength where they can help this couple, everybody realizing where their role ended and began and bled into other roles, to really help them rebuild and figure out the solution that worked best for them and to go forward and raise their kid together.
I'm sure everybody you help or everybody who's coming to you for help at some point will recognize that you do have that deep bench of professionals to support, including recommendations of other people. I know you're mentioning therapists. That's definitely an excellent place to try and get the emotions out, try and get, the voices from your head out. I'm sure that helps the process tremendously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Life is tough, and going through a separation and a divorce is even harder. Like, pull people in who can help you do it, right? There's no shame in going through it and for asking for help through it.
Just as we wrap it up, what I was trying to say is, if I could tell people that buy and hold is actually an amazing strategy, I would tell every single person I could. Is there something that you would wish you could tell every Canadian right now about your business or anything like that?
A couple things. Family law, generally, when you're thinking about, I'm going through a separation, where do I start? Okay. There are going to be people who tell you, go straight to court. There's going to be people who tell you, go to mediation. Okay. Whether you go to mediation, go to court is all about how many people do you need in the room to help you? How much control do you want over the process? Okay. What resources do you have to pay for professionals to help you? And how fast the decisions need to be made. But my recommendation is always talk to a lawyer to make sure you have your rights and obligations, covered and you understand them. But then start the conflict resolution process with as few people in the room as possible. Don't jump to serving your ex with a court application if you can avoid it. There's certainly situations that there's family violence, there's high conflict, there's situations where we will tell clients, you do need to go to court right away because of various factors. But start with as few people in the situation in the room as you possibly can. Right? Don't lose sight of your ex as a human being, right? And don't let other people take over and control the situation if you don't need to, which really connects with what I want everybody to know about how I work and how my team works, which is that we see our clients as real people and they have real lives, and the work that we do with them resonates deeply and far and for a very long time. Right? And we are not the only people who need to be in the room to help our clients. Right? We are not the be all and end all of a separation and divorce. A lawyer plays a really, really important role, but there's lots of other people that you need to chat with to make sure that you are protected, that you're making the best decision for yourself and your family, and that you're not going to have regrets or need to change something and just go back to square one a few years from now.
Well, thanks for sharing that. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
They would go to our website at freshlegal.ca. And from there, they can fill out a basic intake form that makes sure that their problem is something that we can help with. Our intake coordinator takes over from there to see what their issue is and connect them with a lawyer on our team that's in the best position to help them out. And if we can't, we try to refer them on to somebody who can. But freshlegal.ca, you'll find everything about our team and how to contact us and that easy intake form to fill out and get in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Jennifer. We really appreciate that. For everyone on the video, I'll post Jennifer's contact information in the description below. And if you do want to get a hold of her, you know where to get her. So thank you for your time today, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Harry.